Cowboy. Don't look, my dress is gone, whispered the Apache woman behind the waterfall.
Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.
Mason Hale reached the canyon near mid-afternoon, the sun hitting the stone walls in a way that made the air feel hotter than the open plains behind him. He had been riding since sunrise, stopping only once to check the worn leather straps on his saddle and to give his mare, Bramble, a short rest. His work as a horse trader often kept him moving between scattered settlements. But this trip had a different weight behind it. He was on his way to deliver 2 mares to a rancher north of the canyon, hoping the payment would cover the feed and supplies he needed for the next few months. Money was always tight, and he tried to avoid staying in one town long enough for anyone to ask about his past. His past never left him, even when no one asked. Years earlier, he had worked with a scout group that patrolled disputed regions along the frontier. One choice he made during a tense night raid resulted in deaths he still replayed in his mind. Since then, he kept to quiet work, stayed away from crowds, and avoided situations that required trust. The canyon, with its narrow paths and stretches of silence, suited him. He preferred land that kept its distance. He guided Bramble toward the small waterfall he knew from previous travels. Water collected in a shaded pool at the bottom, providing one of the few reliable drinking spots in this barren region. As they approached, Mason slowed his pace, scanning the ground automatically for fresh sign, tracks, disturbed sand, anything to suggest he wasn't alone. He saw nothing unusual, so he dismounted. The air near the water felt cooler. He loosened the bridle so Bramble could drink freely. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his glove, relieved to rest for a few minutes before pushing on. As he knelt to refill his canteen, a faint sound reached him. It wasn't the fall of water or the shifting of his mare's hooves. It was a breath, short, tight, and uneven, like someone trying to steady themselves. Mason froze. His instincts sharpened at once. He had survived too many close encounters during his years as a scout to ignore something so small. He didn't reach for his gun, but let his hand rest near the holster, ready if he needed it. He stood slowly and turned his head only enough to check the edges of the canyon. Nothing moved in the open. The sound had come from behind the falling water. He kept his voice calm and controlled. "Someone there?" For several seconds, there was no answer. Then a woman spoke, her words strained but deliberate. "Don't look at me. Please. I need help." The tone hit him harder than the request itself. She wasn't hiding to ambush him. She was hiding because she didn't want to be seen. Mason stepped back from the water to show he wasn't approaching. "Tell me what you need." "My clothing was taken by the current," she said. "I have nothing to cover myself with." He understood immediately. Without speaking further, he unbuckled his long coat and walked to a flat rock near the pool, placing it there gently. He kept his eyes downward, making sure she heard the distance between his steps. "The coat's here. Take your time." He returned to Bramble's side, ensuring he wasn't blocking her path if she needed space to emerge. Behind the waterfall, movement stirred. The figure stepped out slowly, keeping most of her body angled away. The coat wrapped around her frame, her hands gripping the fabric with a tense, protective hold. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with long black hair hanging wet against her back and shoulders. Her breathing was controlled but shaky. Mason didn't lift his eyes higher than her face. Even that felt like more attention than she wanted. He noticed the exhaustion in her expression and the strain in her posture, as if she had run far before reaching this place. She adjusted the coat once more before speaking. "My name is Asha." "Mason Hale," he said. "You hurt anywhere?" She hesitated before answering. "My foot. I hit a rock when I jumped from the path above." "Let me see from where you're standing," he said, keeping distance. She shifted her weight, extending her leg slightly so he could assess her without stepping closer. Her ankle showed a visible bruise, swollen around the bone. "You'll walk slower, but you can still walk," he said. Asha nodded. Her eyes flicked toward the canyon entrance, checking for movement. "They chased me into here." "Who?" Mason asked quietly. "Raiders," she said. "I don't know how many, but they scatter my group. I ran until I couldn't hear them anymore." Mason evaluated the canyon walls, listening for any echo that didn't belong. He didn't hear pursuit, but he also knew riders could move silently when they wanted to. The possibility of danger changed his priorities. His delivery job could wait. Keeping her alive couldn't. "I know a shelter not far from here," he said. "Old Hunter's place. We'll get you out of the open." Asha studied him carefully, trying to determine if trusting him was a mistake. Mason could read the conflict in her face. She needed protection, but she also understood the risk of depending on a stranger. "You can walk ahead of me," he offered. "I'll stay back. You choose the pace." She took a slow breath and finally nodded. "All right." They moved out from the pool area, her steps cautious, his steady and silent. Asha checked behind her several times, not because she feared him, but because her body hadn't settled from the panic of being chased. Mason didn't comment or rush her. He matched her speed without drawing attention to the bruised ankle slowing her down. The canyon shifted into narrower bends, and the sound of the waterfall faded behind them. Mason noticed the way Asha tightened the coat with each gust of wind, and the way her shoulders gradually relaxed when nothing threatened them for several minutes. He watched her without staring, alert to danger but aware of her discomfort. She had dignity even in this vulnerable state, holding herself upright despite the cold water and the weight of fear she hadn't released yet. "Why were you traveling through here?" Mason asked, keeping his tone neutral. "My family was moving camps," she said quietly. "We tried to avoid conflict areas, but danger found us anyway." He didn't press further. Her voice carried enough truth to tell him she wasn't hiding anything harmful. As they walked, Mason's mind worked through the situation. He hadn't planned to take anyone with him. He avoided responsibility whenever possible. But leaving her alone in a canyon after a raid wasn't something he could justify. He made a decision without saying it aloud. He would ensure her safety, no matter how far off course it took him. Asha slowed as the land leveled out ahead. She pointed weakly toward a rise of stone barely visible through scattered brush. "Is that the shelter?" "Yes," he said. "Almost there." She exhaled, the first sign of relief she'd shown. Mason noticed it, understood it, and walked beside her in silence, both of them aware that the world behind them had shifted the moment she stepped out from behind that waterfall. The farther they moved from the waterfall, the more the sounds of dripping water faded, replaced by the dry scrape of sand under their boots and the low rustle of wind pulling across the canyon walls. Asha kept her weight on the uninjured side, trying not to limp openly, though Mason noticed each time her steps shortened or her breath tightened. He didn't speak about it. Drawing attention to pain often made it worse, and she was already holding herself together with sheer focus. Mason stayed a few paces behind her, close enough that she wouldn't feel unprotected, but far enough to avoid crowding her. He knew how easily someone could feel trapped when their freedom had just been taken from them. His years with the Scouts had taught him that survival wasn't always about physical strength. It was about giving a frightened person room to breathe. Asha glanced back every few minutes, checking that he hadn't stopped or drifted away. Each time she looked, she found him walking with the same steady rhythm. His attention split evenly between her movements and the canyon around them. She realized slowly that he wasn't guarding her. He was watching for threats she might not see. They reached a bend where the canyon floor widened into a shallow basin dotted with scrub. Mason paused, signaling her to rest without speaking. She lowered herself onto a flat rock, pulling the coat over her legs. Her wet hair clung to the fabric, cooling her quickly. She wrapped her arms around her middle and held herself still, trying to calm the shaking that came from adrenaline wearing off. Mason stopped a few feet away, letting her settle before he spoke. "How long were you running?" "Since morning," she said, her voice tired. "I thought I could outrun them, but the canyon turned me around. When I reached the water, I didn't know where else to go." "Anyone else from your group make it out?" he asked. She shook her head. "I don't know. The raid happened fast. I lost sight of everyone when the fire started." Mason felt a familiar pull in his chest. Recognition. He remembered the countless times he'd watched innocent people scatter in terror while soldiers or raiders tore through camps. He wasn't proud of the role he'd play back then. The memory added weight to this moment, pushing him to stay with her rather than finish his delivery job alone. Asha studied him as he scanned the canyon walls. "You listen to everything," she said quietly. "Habit," he replied. "It keeps me alive." Her gaze lingered on him, measuring whether he was being truthful. She saw no sign of exaggeration or pride, only a man who had learned caution through experience. When she rose again, her steps were stiffer. Mason adjusted his pace so she wouldn't feel the pressure to move faster. He didn't comment when she stopped to steady herself against the stone wall, but he moved slightly ahead, offering shade with his presence while she caught her breath. "Why are you traveling alone?" she asked, wiping a bead of water from her forehead. "Work," he said. "Trades, deliveries. Keeps me fed, keeps me moving." Moving from what? He didn't answer immediately. He watched the horizon through the narrow opening of the canyon. "From things I don't want following me," he finally said. She accepted that without pushing further, understanding the tone more than the explanation. The land began to slope upward, signaling they were nearing the shelter he had mentioned. Asha hesitated before climbing a short rise, the uneven footing challenging her bruised ankle. Mason stepped beside her, not to take her arm, but to give her balance if she chose to use him. She didn't hold on, but she stayed close enough that his support was there if needed. At the top of the rise, the old hunter's shelter came into view, half hidden by brush, small, and worn from years of weather. Its slanted roof sagged toward the right, and a narrow entrance sat just wide enough for one person to slip through. Smoke stains along the stones proved someone had used it once, but the place now looked untouched. Asha stared at it with a mixture of relief and hesitation. "No one is inside? I checked it last season when I passed through," Mason said. "Empty then. Probably still empty." She let out a slow breath. "It's better than being out here." Mason nodded and moved toward the shelter with caution, approaching from the side rather than walking straight in. Asha watched him move, noticing the way his body shifted into alertness, shoulders slightly tensed, steps silent, hand near but not on his weapon. She saw then that this wasn't just a traveler. He had been trained for danger. He stepped through the entrance first, scanning every corner. Only when he was fully certain did he turn to her and give a short nod. "Safe." Asha walked inside, pulling the coat tighter around her. The air was dry and still, and the shade inside the shelter